Hello everyone, my name is Maria. I'm 15 years old, and my parents think that I am possessed by a demon. You'll probably ask why do they think so? Now let me tell you my story from the very beginning. As far back as I can remember, my parents always believed in conspiracy theories and were active members of different sects. They called them holy reunions with brothers and sisters, but these were just typical sects. My parents would always donate money for the sect's needs and help them as much as they could. For example, as my father is a carpenter, he often assisted in the construction of meeting centers for the community reunions. And my mother is a housewife, but she is a very skillful seamstress and a cook, so she often sews clothes for new adults in need, and she also helped to cook food for community potluck events. As for me, my parents would always drag me to these community reunions ever since my childhood. They even thought that I might skip studies in a traditional neighborhood school and attend community school instead. But my grandparents insisted that I receive a traditional education. Despite all this sectarian bullshit, my life was quite a happy one. You might think, how can life in a sect be a dream life? After all, this is not a traditional life, and there are very few kids who share this life experience. But this is not true. Over the last couple of years, I have made many friends who are also the children of sectarians. They would also attend our community reunions. I'm also a musician and a vocalist in a rock band, and recently I have got a boyfriend, but we haven't kissed yet. Our parents say that kissing before marriage is a sin. I also have a most wonderful uncle, my Uncle Bruce. In the past, he was a gangster and a member of a major gangster network, but then he got transformed and finally got on the right track. And now he works as a professional psychologist in prison. In his earlier days, he traveled all over the world and he often told me many interesting stories. He's also helping young folks who have gone down the wrong path. He's supporting and leading them by his own example, and he's teaching them that the life of kindness and love is much better than the life of violence. So everything was going great until my parents were invited to join a new sect, which was much stranger than the previous one. The sect leader was a certain high priest Stephen, but everyone just called him Brother Stephen. He was following old school traditions and he considered everything that he didn't understand to be evil. For example, he didn't approve of my playing music in a rock group, and he often told my parents that electric guitars and drums are very loud and noisy instruments, and they have been invented by evil forces. But my uncle defended me as much as he could, and my parents listened to his opinion. During all these years in the sect environment, I grew up as a normal, ordinary teenager. It was all good thanks to my uncle. He often visited our house and taught me critical thinking. He also taught me to have doubts, ask questions, and never take words at their face value. My father constantly argued with him and complained that my uncle was misleading and messing with me. But he was wrong. My uncle taught me a lot. He also gave me the key to his house where he had a very big library. I could come there at any time and spend time reading books. And this is exactly what I couldn't do at home, since our sect leaders did not allow us to have any books at home, except for religious books. And they believed that most books are evil. One day, my Uncle Bruce went on a business trip to a neighboring city to run psychotherapy sessions with young folks who lost their way in life, and he stayed there for a long time. Brother Stephen took advantage of it, and he put a very strong pressure on my parents. The first thing he did was to tell my parents to bring him all my musical instruments from the garage where a rock group was doing music rehearsals. Then, during our next community reunion, he publicly broke and burned all of our band's musical instruments in front of all of our audience. I felt totally broken and devastated, as if my soul was torn away. I ran to my parents and asked them to defend and support me, but they took Stephen's side. "It's for your own good," they said. After that, Brother Stephen told my parents that my clothes were not decent and humble, so they immediately prohibited me from wearing my favorite rock music t-shirt. Same things happened to many other children of our sect members. Their parents took away their things and personal belongings and gave them to Brother Stephen. And after that, Brother Stephen publicly burned them as evil items. In addition, following Brother Stephen's recommendations, my parents prohibited me to date Nick, my boyfriend, because I'm still too young to get married. And, as we cannot yet get married, our relationship is a sin. They said that it's too early for me to think about dating guys, and instead I should attend our community reunions. So, day after day, my life turned for the worse, as my parents did everything whatever Brother Stephen said without asking any questions. And then I got into a really big disaster. As a result of all my strong recent worries and stress, I was feeling tired and exhausted. In addition to my school workload, my parents demanded that I also read spiritual literature, as it was meant to lead me for a good path. So I had a constant lack of sleep and was feeling tired, and once during our community reunion, I fainted from exhaustion. At this moment, my parents finally got worried. They understood something was going wrong, but they didn't take me to the doctor. Instead, they concluded that I was overcome by dark forces. Then, a couple days later, as I got no help, I fainted again at our next community reunion. And at that moment, Brother Stephen started pouring water on me and said some abracadabra phrases in Old Latin. He also pressed a silver amulet to my forehead. And at this moment, a very strange thing happened. I felt a terrible pain on my forehead, and the silver amulet literally burned my skin. I screamed in pain, and Brother Stephen said, "This is a clear proof that Maria is possessed by demons." Well, I sure know that there are no demons in our life, so I decided to investigate this phenomenon myself, and I also visited a doctor, and I kept it a secret from my parents. The doctor made medical allergy tests on my skin, and he found out that I was allergic to silver. It turned out that I get a skin flush every time I touch silver. Yes, this is a very rare type of medical allergy, but who will believe me? They already convinced all of our community that I have been possessed. As a result, my parents took me out of school and put me on home education because Brother Stephen said school is bad for me. They also took my mobile phone away from me so that the electronic demons could not reach me. The last thing I had left was my favorite encyclopedia, but they also took it away from me as they said all this knowledge was no good. Then they gave all my gadgets to Brother Stephen to keep them away and in safety while I slowly recovered. In addition, for safety reasons, he took away all of our household equipment and appliances from our house. A TV set, a toaster, a washing machine, and even a refrigerator. He even took away my dad's car, as he said it was the devil's chariot. Brother Stephen said that we need to get rid of all these things to help my active recovery, as the electronic waves from our household appliances opened the door to my mind for the creatures of darkness. Then, one day, it all got to the point where my parents decided to call an exorcist to get away the demon from my body back to the underworld. This was the last straw, and I decided to run away from home. My friend Anna and I agreed that we would run away together. We secretly met near my uncle's house. We prepared and packed all of our belongings in advance. We were about to hit the road, but suddenly we heard a car coming from around the corner, and what a surprise, it was my father's car. Dad bought his Chevrolet Impala many years ago when he was young. It was a very good car, and even now, after many years, it still was quite trendy and looked like a new sports car. The Impala slowly drove around the corner, and I decided to secretly follow it to find out who was driving it. The car stopped quite nearby, so Anna and I crept up closer and hid behind the trees so that we could see who would get out of the car. The car door opened, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Brother Stephen, but he looked so different now, like a stylish and fashionable dandy. I whispered to Anna to get her phone and take pictures of him. My phone, as you remember, was taken away from me by my parents. Stephen was wearing a brand new black tuxedo. Mr. Hawkins' gold Rolex watch was sparkling on his wrist. Last week, Steven took this Rolex watch away from Mr. Hogan on the pretext that he was saving Mr. Hogan from the electronic evil darkness. Then Steven took out my iPhone and called. It was definitely my phone. It had our music rap group sticker on it. I was shocked. The man who called the card the Devil's card and the telephone the electronic horn of Beelzebub was secretly using all these modern technologies himself. A few minutes later, a young woman came out of the house dressed in a bright cocktail dress. If we were at our community reunion, he would never allow a woman to dress and look like this. Then he kissed her passionately. I was about to vomit when I saw it. It was disgusting. It was all clear for me now that all these talks about the sin of kissing were also a lie. But what shocked me most was the music that was playing loud in Brother Steven's car. It was heavy metal, and Steven was shaking his head and dancing to it. And I immediately remembered how he broke in fury the demonic music instruments of our rock group. Then Steven opened a can of beer and lit a cigarette. He looked at his lady and said, "Baby, we will soon get out of this dump. I have stripped off these dummies of all they have." Then they got in the car and drove away, and the car disappeared into the night. "Anna, did you take pictures of him?" I asked. "Of course I did," she said. So we took her phone with photographs and went straight to the police station. They listened to us and examined our photos. Then they tracked the photos through the criminal network footage, and they found out that Brother Steven was much wanted criminal, a crook who just escaped from arrest in another state. As we found out, Brother Steven was not a high priest at all, but a primitive crook who shamelessly deceived us and lied to us. He robbed us of all other belongings. He took some of them to the local pawn shop to get money, and he kept the most valuable gadgets for himself. We tried to keep track of him, but he never came back. We never saw neither him nor my dad's car again. He probably sold it, took the money, and disappeared without a trace. But the worst thing about this story is that even though Steven turned out to be a crook, my parents still stick to their beliefs, and they still believe that I am possessed by dark forces. They don't want to accept that I just have a medical allergy for silver. They say that allergies do not exist, and the demon invented this allergy in my head. They even called an exorcist to come to our home and talk to me. When he came, we locked ourselves in my room all alone, and he had an honest conversation with me. He turned out to be a smart and understanding person, and he admitted that I had a medical allergy to silver, and he took my side. He even talked to my parents to prove my words, but they got angry instead, and they kicked him out and called him a fake fraudster. After some time, my parents invited 2 other exorcists to our home to meet with me. But again, they both confirmed my medical diagnosis, and they said they couldn't help me overcome my allergy. They also told my parents that I am not possessed by demons at all. Now my parents are going to take me to meet a Tibetan shaman. They hope he will take this pain off me with his magic and will ease me from my demons. Even my Uncle Bruce, who finally returned from his business trip, could not convince my parents that I was all safe and healthy and I was not under the influence of dark forces. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. I can't stand all this nonsense anymore, and I want to run away from my parents. I can't stay with my uncle, or I can apply for custody, or I can just live in a local shelter instead. I would agree to any possible option just to get out of this crazy family of mine and escape from this nightmare. What would you do if you were in my place? Write your ideas and thoughts in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and give it a like.